Friends, this is a series of videos on the history of Qutub Minar. All of us have been taught that Qutub Minar was built by Qutbuddin Aibak in the 12th or 13th centuries. But there's so much of contrary information on the internet or on the various history books. For example, when you type the question, when was Qutub Minar built? Then AI says that Qutub Minar was built, its construction began in 1192 by Qutbuddin Aibak. Now, 1192 was the same year when apparently Prithviraj Chauhan was defeated in the Battle of Tarain by Qutbuddin Aibak. Okay, so this is the first answer. If you scroll down, then you get Wikipedia. Wikipedia is the library for all partial Gyanis. So what does Wikipedia say? Wikipedia says it was built mostly between 1199 and 1299. So it pushes the date 7 years later from what AI says, right? So this is another interesting answer. 1199 and 1220. Okay. What does UNESCO say? So UNESCO World Heritage Center, and by the way, Qutub Minar is a UNESCO monument. So UNESCO says built in the early 13th century, a few kilometers south of Delhi, the red sandstone tower of Qutub Minar is 72.5 meters high. Means that Minar was built in early 13th century, which means it could be 1200, it could be 1201, it could be 1202, it could be 1203. Okay, could be any of these dates. Okay, it's not clear. So even these guys, UNESCO also says that it does not say that Qutub Minar was built by Qutbuddin Aibak, but it says it was early 13th century, a totally different answer from the other two. Okay, but what does the government of India say? So the government of India's Archaeological Survey of India and ASI preserves Qutub Minar. It says that Qutbuddin laid the foundation of Minar in AD 1199 for the use of muezzin, crier, to give calls for prayer and raise the first story. So it says that the foundation of the Minar was laid in 1199. One very important thing that the Archaeological Survey of India says is that it doesn't mention Qutub Minar as Qutub Minar. It mentions Qutub Minar as just Minar. In fact, it's important to note that this tower was called as Minar until 16th, 17th or 18th century. Okay, it wasn't called Qutub Minar earlier. Which leads us to the question whether Qutbuddin Aibak actually made this tower. But let's first try to find out, when did Qutbuddin Aibak die? So I typed this answer question in internet. When did Qutbuddin Aibak die? So Qutbuddin Aibak died in 14th November 1210. Cool. Okay, so it's 1210. Barabar. So, are there any books which say that Qutbuddin Aibak made this tower? Strangely, there are none. If there were any books, then these guys would have put it. And I'm talking about the contemporary history books. What does a contemporary history book mean? Contemporary history book means that the book is recording those events at the time when that event was happening, right? Which means that if Qutbuddin Aibak was building this tower, then there would have been some historian who would have been writing about this book, right, about this event. There is no historian who writes about it, neither during his times, nor during Iltutmish's times, nor Razia Sultan's times, nor Bourbon's times, nor Khilji's times, nor Tughlaq's times. These are the 4 or 5 important dynasties that ruled Delhi between 1192 to the 14th century, to the middle of the 14th century. None of the historians who have written about this sultans say that Qutb Minar was built by the Muslims, particularly Qutbuddin Aibak. So the next question is, are there any inscriptions? Yes, there is one inscription or a few inscriptions on the outside walls of Minar, but those are incomplete and they are broken. They don't say that this was built by Iltutmish or Qutbuddin Aibak and all that. Cool. So this is the confusion about Qutbuddin Aibak's so-called Qutub Minar. Now my next part of this video is that let's assume that Qutbuddin Aibak started building this tower in 1192, as is being said by AI. But do you know that even in 1192 there was a Hindu king who was ruling Delhi? His name was Tejpal. And who was Tejpal? Tejpal was the son of Chaharpal. And Chaharpal was actually the king of Delhi during the Battle of Tarain. But that's a different story. I'll come into that. So, the historicity of Tejpal is there in history. Various contemporary historians have said about Tejpal that he ruled Delhi for a few months or at least a year until he was disposed of by Qutbuddin Aibak. So he was there at least in 1192. So AI's answer is incorrect. Okay. Now, as we go further deep down in this historicity of Qutub Minar, I will indicate two indirect proofs according to which this Minar was not built by at least Qutbuddin Aibak. So the first evidence is Alai Minar. What is Alai Minar? Alai Minar is an incomplete tower which is, I think, 50 or 60 meters north of Qutub Minar in the Mehrauli complex, and it's an incomplete tower, not more than 1 or 2 stories, built of rubble, and you can see that it's incomplete. And historians say that Alauddin Khilji, who ruled Delhi from 1303, wanted to make tower like this but failed. Why did he fail? Because he did not have money. This is what the historians say. But Alauddin Khilji was a very rich guy, right? He ruled Delhi for between 1303 to 1315 or 16, like that, and he looted so many kingdoms. He looted Somnath, which had so much of money. He looted Devgiri, which was a prominent kingdom in south. He looted Gujarat. He looted he looted Bengal. He looted Ujjain. He looted so many Hindu kingdoms. He had lots of money. So why could he not make Alai Minar in the same way as Qutb Minar? The answer could be that this guy did not have the technology. Simple. If the Muslims built this tower, then Alauddin Khilji should have the technology. He didn't. So this is an indirect proof. Another indirect proof about the historicity of Qutb Minar is one Mr. Begler. Mr. Begler was he was an archaeologist actually. He was an engineer and he used to work for the Archaeological Survey of India way back in the middle of the 19th century, and he recorded the measurements of all these monuments in Mehrauli and in Delhi. And after examining Qutb Minar, he actually says in his report, which is available online, and says that this structure was clearly built by the Hindus. Why? Because he had already surveyed so many Hindu palaces and temples, and he said that look, this tower was actually built by Hindus. He went inside the tower, climbed up to the highest point, and said that okay, at least this up till this particular point of time, place was built by Hindus. So this is Mr. Begler. Now there's another indirect proof. And that proof is coming from a highly unpredictable source. You know who? He was Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Who was Sir Syed Ahmad Khan? Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the founder of Aligarh Muslim University. And he says in his tours and travels of Delhi that I'm convinced that this structure, which means Qutb Minar, was not built by Muslims, but he was built by Hindus. Yes, sir, he actually says this. The founder of Aligarh Muslim University in his book says that the Qutb Minar was built by Hindus. So these are those indirect evidences which point to Qutb Minar being not built by at least the Muslims and being built by the Hindus. But these are indirect evidences. In the next video, I am going to tell you what are the direct evidences that Qutb Minar was actually built by Hindus and not Muslims. Until then, stay with me.